Welcome Rotarians and guests, and Fernando Zazueta. We got some nesting dolls here with vodka inside. Maybe I'll auction it off later. No greeting line today. This is meeting number 5,317. It's a lot of meetings. We're going to begin with Nicholas Adams. Come on up, Nicholas.
Thank you, President Steve. President Steve is rooting for his Giants, which I know is really hard for. It's hard for Larry Stone in the room to hear anything other than about the A's. Sorry, Larry, boo. So President Steve has asked all of you to join in singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" today with me. Would you all please stand and join in singing something fun today? You all know the words. I expect to hear all of you, and those on Zoom, please sing in your offices too. Take me out to the ball game, take me out to the crowd, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back, for it's root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Play ball.
It's nice to have music back in the room, isn't it? Let's give Nicholas a big hand, please. Guest introductions, please come to the microphone in front and bring your guest with you if you would. Are there any guests today? Hey, there's at least one. Made my day. Thank you to the 2 mics. The 2 mics speaking at the mic. Mike
that would make a total of 3 mics. My guest is Mike Anning from Mosaic Mortgage Group, and of course our downtown resident and friend.
Mike Anning, why don't you take the mic for a second and make up a story or tell us something about yourself?
Oh, well, I'm a downtown native, born and raised in San Jose. Moved down to Morgan Hill for a while and came back. So I'm living in Nagley Park. Love the neighborhood, have a business in the area for the last 20 years, doing residential lending. And, really looking forward to just contributing and being part of downtown more than I already am.
Well, thank you, Mike. And I'll point out, before you applaud, that Mike Anning has attended more meetings this year than about 90% of our club has. So that's a way for me to attempt to shame all those people who never come to meetings. If you're there on Zoom, would you please come to a meeting? Thank you, Mike and Mike.
Yep, thank you.
And another Mike, how's that?
Afternoon, President Steve. I'm very pleased to introduce again my guest, a neighbor from up in the hills, gentleman farmer, also a retired circus acrobat, Matt Groban.
Matt Groban,
Also,
welcome.
I think you nominated him for Best Dressed last time.
I did. He might win it again. Matt, come up and tell us a story. What did you do in the circus?
I did acrobatic bicycle in the circus. I went from Bellarmine to circus school in Montreal.
That was a pretty simple segue, wasn't it?
Yeah, right, like you do. And then from that, at the age of 40, I got bored in Chicago and became a police officer for 4 years. And I did that until January when I moved out to San Jose, and my wife and I have 12 amazing, incredible acres up in San Jose, not far from Mike, and now doing some farming and permaculture practice and all sorts of exciting, fun planting and animals. We have 53 rescue animals, and it's a lot of fun going on up there. So thank you for having me, President Steve.
Welcome, Matt.
And if I can explain the kilts, I'm in a bagpipe band, and I decided life is more fun in a skirt. So you'll never see me in pants unless they make me.
Matt, I think you know the next time you arrive, it better be with a bagpipe to do the musical introduction.
You got a deal.
Make it happen. After the last time he visited, I was so taken by his kilt and his outsized personality that we talked afterwards, and we're going to go hang out and drink beer and swap lies about Scotland. Next up, Mike Conniff again. Mike, can you come on up with Mark Mckenna? Mark is our newest member, and Mike's going to introduce him, and Mark's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Thank you, President Steve. Mark Mckenna has spent the early years of his life in South America, or actually Latin America, where his parents worked as educators. He later pursued higher education in several schools, ending up with graduate work in conflict management. Mark and I met in the early 2000s during our effort to create a global studies program at San Jose State. He had worked for a decade and a half in South Asia with the Asia Foundation, and he fit in very well with our plans to develop an online degree program in global studies. Mark served as associate director of our program for many years and then moved on to teaching here and in San Francisco. He and I shared many interests and commitments to international education, including his wife, Carol Reed, who teaches business at San Jose State and in Japan. Mark's experience abroad and permanent residence in San Jose suggests he would be an ideal candidate for our club. So let's welcome Mark as our most recent member.
Thank you, Mike.
For understanding innovation.
So as Mike said, my name is Mark Reed Mckenna, and I've been given 2 minutes to tell you 5 interesting things about myself. So I thought I'd start with my name, Mark Reed Mckenna. As you've heard, my wife's name is Carol Reed. She teaches business at San Jose State. When we married, Carol really didn't want to take my name, but she also didn't want to keep her old name. So she decided to take her grandmother's maiden name, Reed. Being a traditionalist myself, I thought it'd be a good idea if we at least shared a name. So I thought, well, I'll change my middle name to Reed. At least we'll have that in common. Ironically, Reed, as it's currently spelled, was not really her grandmother's birth name. When Carol's great-grandfather died, her great-grandmother went to a numerologist, and the numerologist suggested that she change the spelling of her name from R-E-E-D to R-E-A-D. She'd have much better fortune. And Hattie convinced 3 of her children to do likewise, and that's how I got my middle name. This leads to the second interesting thing, my interest in genealogy. So far, we've found my wife's 3rd cousins in France, Germany, and the UK, and my 4th cousins in Ireland, Australia, and Canada. My interest in genealogy, however, is very broad. So if you have a question about your ancestry and you want to talk to me, please feel free. There's another interesting thing. My wife and I have lived in San Jose for a little bit over a decade. And this is the longest I've lived anywhere in my life. I think it makes me a San Josean. What may be more interesting is that San Jose beat out Islamabad, Pakistan, as the 2nd longest place I've ever lived. Before that was San Diego, and before that there's a tie between Emeryville, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Buenos Aires, Argentina. So you could say the 3rd interesting thing about me is that I've moved around a bit. Which brings me to a 4th interesting thing. As Mike said, I spent a significant part of my childhood in Buenos Aires. This means that I learned about Jose de San Martin and the crossing of the Andes long before I knew about George Washington and the crossing of the Delaware. Now, my Argentine identity isn't as strong as it once was, except every 4 years when I obviously root for the Albiceleste. Before Lionel Messi, Diego Maradona, who played for my favorite team, the Boca Juniors, was my hero. Which brings me to my 5th interesting point. While I have not had many religious experiences, I believe that in 1986, I saw the hand of God. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to contributing to our club.
Welcome again, Mark. And I think if you got 2 minutes to speak, that's what you're supposed to do right there. So thank you very much, Mark. Next up is Andrea Mckenzie. She's part of our COVID cohort. Where'd Andrea go? There, come on up. And a number of members joined during COVID. It was a weird time. Poor Fernando spent a whole year on the damn Zoom. And so we're giving them a chance to tell their stories. And so welcome, Andrea.
Thanks, President Steve, and hello, fellow Rotarians. Again, my name is Andrea Mckenzie. I'm the General Manager of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. For those of you who don't know what that is, we're a public land conservation and stewardship agency that protects the wildlands and the farmlands of Santa Clara Valley and connects people to nature. I joined Rotary back in March of this year thanks to the prodding of my friend and mentor Rod Diridon Sr., and I serve on the Climate Action Committee. I think Rod had a couple of interests back in March. He wanted to get more women in Rotary, and he wanted a green movement to kind of move into Rotary. So watch out, everybody, here we are. I was born in Schenectady, New York, but mostly grew up in Los Angeles with the Santa Monica Mountains as my backyard. And I'm the proud daughter of immigrant parents from Hong Kong and England who immigrated to the US in the early 1950s. My background is in environmental studies from UC Santa Barbara and urban planning from UCLA. And I moved to the Bay Area in the 80s to pursue my dream job as a National Park Service ranger on Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay. After many years of applying to the National Park Service to be a ranger in Yellowstone or Grand Teton or Yosemite, what assignment did I get? Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay. But you know, it was one of the best moves that ever happened for me because besides that and growing up in Los Angeles, I really started to understand the importance of nature to urban areas and the resiliency and the sustainability of our cities. My spouse Jenny and I live in the Cambrian district or area of San Jose, and we have a 19-year-old daughter who's growing up really quickly as a sophomore at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. And I'm super excited today for Chad to speak to us. I think that was planned, but I'm really excited to hear what he has to say about ecological restoration. And so look forward to being a fellow Rotarian with all of you. Thank you.
A reminder, we all spent a year and a half on Zoom and didn't get together. People like Andrea, other Red Badgers, and new people, please go out of your way to sit next to someone you don't know at the meetings and welcome Andrea and all these other people in the COVID cohort and those who are joining after COVID. So thank you again, Andrea. I'd love a tour of Alcatraz sometime if you've got a free day. Although they might keep me there, who knows. Charlie McCollum, come on up to talk about Lee Weimers.
So this is just a quick reminder that next week's meeting will include the presentation of the 9th annual Lee Weimer's Emerging Artists Award. It is always one of the highlights of the Rotary year. We will be giving $5,000 grants to 4 different artists, really terrific artists, that they can use as they see fit to move their careers along. The artists themselves will be here to introduce their presentations and to meet those of us who are on hand. But like last year, the performances and presentations will actually be online or being recorded in advance. The MC for the occasion will be our very own Lisa Millette from City Lights. Bert Wine will be pouring some festive, Bert George will be pouring some, actually, maybe it should be Bert Wine. Bert will be pouring some festive wine for those of you who will be here in person. We hope Most of you will be. So I think it's going to be an absolutely terrific show. You know, again, this is one of our big initiatives for the year. And I really encourage all of you to come, bring a friend, introduce somebody to Rotary through this program. Thanks a lot.
Next week would be a great time to bring a guest. It'd be a great time to bring anybody for that matter. But I want to pitch all of you on a new idea that, I can't remember who told me this an hour ago. I have no memory left. But try to bring another Rotarian to Rotary. It's a new idea. You know, historically, the idea was guests who don't know what Rotary is, and you would bring them, and then they would find out what Rotary is. And I think we have about 417 members who have forgotten what Rotary is. So would you each call one of your fellow Rotarians who's a friend and say, would you please come join us at a meeting? Part of Rotary is seeing speakers and watching programs, but for me, the most important thing of all is being with all of you. So would you all help me try, make a call, please. Carl Salas, you want to come up and talk about the play garden? No, Mick's not here. In fact, Carl, you can just do it from there if you want.
Well, I'm a pastor.
Oh, come on up. He's still hoping that they change the rule. He wants to be president again.
Brian Adams taught me that. And I know what you're thinking, Brian. Oops, I can take this off. Hey, yeah, so just real quick, the Play Garden Committee always does this thing with families, helping families. At our wonderful, incredible, world-renowned Play Garden, they're going to do it on the 18th. It's the 18th, right? Yeah, they're going to do it on the 18th. And what they do is they bring the families in with their kids, and it's the families with disabled kids. They have the play garden themselves from like 3 till 5:30. But they took that as an idea to dedicate a bench to Julie and Mel Matsushima. And they're going to do that at 6 p.m. on the 18th. So it's a chance for anyone and all of us to be there. Number one, honor Julie and Mel posthumously, but also to have the play garden to ourselves with wine, which I've never done. It's as beautiful as ever. It'll be all to ourselves, and you'll have a glass of wine or beer, maybe. Wine, George, I haven't asked you yet. Anyway, so I just want to remind you, put the 18th on your calendar, 5:45 to 6:30. Come in, come out, have a glass of wine, and see that beautiful playground.
Can't remember. Is it Wine George, Bert Wine, George Bert? Which is it, Bert? You're not even listening. That's okay. I'm used to that. We're going to ring the bell and raise some money. Who wants to ring the bell first? Come on, somebody. I know I've got at least one. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi. Hi, President Steve. I wanted to ring the bell for
There you go. Right into that. Right into the mic.
Okay, for Carl and Frank, who spent hours this week helping me with my camera and learning different things about Rotary. So anyway, ring the bell once for me.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And it's Bert Wine.
Yes, you know, I'm past president. I'm just. Thanks, Carl, for setting that precedent. I would like to set another precedent. I'm going to ring the bell 5 times, Steve, or you can ring the bell for me. I had my phone on last week. I don't know if anybody heard it. Well, the 50 people that were here heard it. But I was so embarrassed, and I should never have the phone on. So the new precedent, anybody has a phone on and it rings at Rotary should pay $500 minimum.
Who's next?
Oh, hell, I'm a past president.
Bam!
Oh, God, it's good to be back. I've been one of the Zoomers for many weeks. I have my reasons. It's good to be back. I thought I'd return before you guys wrote a eulogy for me. And I'm going to ring the bell in honor of my grandkids. 16 days from now, my grandson Lincoln will turn 3 years old. And just a few weeks ago in September, My beautiful granddaughter Ella turned 1. So how about 4 rings for those kids?
Was it hard to leave the lectern there, Brian? And here's another one. Fernando, come on up.
I'm being invited up.
Come on up.
Great.
Just a reminder, you do not have to be a former president to ring the bell, okay? It's open to all of you.
So this is what it's like, huh? I've been asked, what's it like now that I'm no longer president? I said, I don't know, I never was. Steve has done a wonderful job to remind me how much more fun it is to be up here than on Zoom. But I have to say, Zoom, for those who can't come, it's a very useful and very convenient means of participating as Rotarians. So long as they continue to pay their dues, I'm good with that. But, but I'd like to say that it is a lot more fun for me because I get energized by being with my friends, all of you. I've told this to several individuals who asked me, what's Rotary like? I said, you know, you walk into the Rotary meeting here, or as I did in Hamburg, and you realize that everybody here wants the same thing that we want. We want a better environment, we want a better society, a better city to live in. And you know that all of us are here for that reason, and you feel at home. So, let me just say, I'm only going to give $100 because I expect to be back here more than once. Thank you.
That was beautiful. That should be in the Rotary International brochure. Hello.
Hi there. Hi, President Steve. Nice to see you. Karen Philbrick, Transportation Research Management.
How are you doing, Karen?
I'm great. I'd like to ring the bell twice, and this is in honor of my mother, who's successfully, this beautiful, powerful, loving woman, in the last 6 months has undergone a mastectomy as well as the removal of the upper right quadrant of her teeth. And she has not skipped a beat. She is positive and just as engaged. And I'm so proud to be her daughter. So 2 rings for me, please, for 2 successful
Thank you, Karen.
surgeries.
Beat that, Christine.
Oops. I need a ladder.
Just tilt that thing down right into your mouth. There you go.
Thank you. I was hoping Josh would be here, but I'm going to do this on his behalf. We celebrated nuptials for him and Antonia Labor Day weekend, and now I have a new daughter-in-law, Antonia, and a new step-grandchild, Winnie, and she happens to be the same age as grandchild Savannah. So now I have, and they even look alike, so now I have to buy 2 of every toy. So 2 rings.
2 rings, you got it, Christine. Nicholas Adams. Steve Ellenberg first.
Steve Ellenberg, please.
I don't know who made this rule that you have to be a president to come up here, so it's closer for me. I'm coming up. So I'm going to ring the bell in honor of our great culinary and hospitality committee, and in particular Helen Lambert, who made a heck of a feast for me and for Susan, and they gave us, the hospitality committee was gracious enough to give us an extra 2 guests. And I mean, it was just incredible. And so if you're thinking about bidding at the next auction on the dinner from the Culinary and Hospitality Committee, please don't, because that's our auction item, and we always get it. Steve, 5 times for us.
That's really fun to ring it a whole bunch of times. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, President Steve. I'm going to give you another opportunity to ring it a whole bunch of times. Our agency, Ninico Communications, quietly this year celebrated its 10th anniversary, and it's something we're really proud of. We've grown. Thank you. We've grown from a small local PR and ad agency here in San Jose to becoming one of a top-rated public relations agencies in both the greater San Jose metro region, but also the greater Los Angeles area, where I travel every other week for work as well. So thank you on behalf of our agency to the many Rotarians who have supported our locally owned business the past decade. So please, 10 rings.
Wow,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Nicholas. 5 times 2 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20. Hi, Jen.
Hi, President Steve. I'd like to ring the bell 3 times. Recently, I graduated with my master's in interior architecture and design. I started my own interior design business, and even more exciting, I have a new classification, interior designer.
Oh, way to go, Jen. Morris Chubb.
Well, I might as well do it today. My son and grandson are coming to visit me next week, and I get to use my son a lot. He's an attorney, and in fact, his wife's an attorney, and I used her last week as well. So it's good to have them in the family. It keeps my bills down. Anyway, 2 rings for the 2 that are coming to visit.
Thank you, Morris. Hey, Carl.
I'll stay down here this time. Hey, nobody mentioned it, but I went to that international dinner last week. That was fantastic. It was really fantastic. My hat's off. Not only was the food great, but you know, with the words spoken about Roy Russell, I actually teared up. So thank you, International Committee. It was fabulous. Thank you. That's 1 ring. 2nd ring. So I've had to travel. Brian, I've had to miss a couple of meetings too. And the Zoom, it's good to be here, but when you have, I was in Connecticut, and boom, 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 I'm on the Zoom meeting. I could see Steve perfectly, better than I can see you now. And so I'm ringing a 2nd one for those guys. Thank you so much for what you do, how you put this together. We look like the greatest Rotary Club in the world when you're on that Zoom, so thank you. So that's 2 rings, that's another ring. And then lastly, Steve, if you have time, I've been taking notes. If you have time at the end of this, before the speaker, I could spend 2 minutes. I've been taking notes about why they really should be here today. It's really cool.
I'm going to have you after the speaker, Carl. Okay. After the speaker. Brad Barron.
Hey, President Steve.
Yeah.
So I was just going to come up here to delay this even more to see how frustrated you would get, but no, I am. I'm going to do 1 ring, and the reason I'm going to do 1 ring has to do with my 2 girls at Midi and my 1 at University of Portland. The youngest one is a freshman. She's playing on the Midi volleyball team. They won the tournament in Santa Cruz this weekend, and so far they're undefeated in league play.
Way to go, Brad. Hold on a moment, Mauricio. I didn't ring for Carl. I think it was 3. Go ahead, Mauricio.
Thank you, President Steve. Mauricio Cordova, future past president. So I'm going to talk from down here.
Come on up. Come on.
Why not? Join the fun, right? I want to ring the bell 2 times, and that would be for Loaves and Fishes. This past fiscal year, we broke 1.5 million meals delivered to the community. And I want to thank Rotary, because with so many of your grants, some of that was very possible. So without organizations like Rotary, we will not have been able to do it. So 2 rings for Loaves and Fishes and their 1.5 million meals. And they're the job that brought me here and got to meet everybody with that. So thank you.
This will be how many rings was that, Mauricio? 2. This is the last ring the bell for today. Go ahead.
Well, President Steve, this is Tudo. I'd like to ring 2 bells. First, thank you, Carl, for mentioning the International Feast. Yes, we had a fabulous time last Friday. Those we don't have the official report, financial report from the office yet, but I like to say that my estimate is that we probably have a little bit over $50,000, including the matching fund, 20K from the Help. So at least we have that amount. And this morning I received another email from someone who wanted to donate. So probably we have a little bit more. So thank you everyone in the International Service Committee for organizing that event. And thank you everyone who came. That's my first ring. And my second ring is about VN Health. This year, we celebrate our 30th anniversary. And throughout the difficult times, COVID time, I'm very moved that people are still giving. They are still pouring their support. Our concert coming next month have received over $100,000 sponsorship. And our COVID relief fund today exceeds 200K. So I would say, oh, many kind-hearted out there who always want to help. Thank you.
Thank you, too. With that, Jason Alexander is going to introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon, my friends. How are you? Good to see you here at the Summit Center, and those of you on Zoom, good to see you on Zoom. Program Planning Committee has been doing a lot of work to bring speakers to talk about environmental issues, but it's a great personal pleasure for me to introduce Chance Cultrano to you this afternoon. I first met Chance about 10 years ago when I was a philosophy professor at St. Xavier University in Chicago, where Chance was an undergraduate with a dual major in political science and in philosophy. Now, such was my teaching prowess that neither Chance nor I can really remember very vividly or clearly what it was that he took from me, but I do vividly remember Chance's senior project for his BA in philosophy. Using field-based research conducted in Yellowstone National Park, or in and around the park, Chance discussed some of the obstacles to the formulation of sound environmental policy, public policy around environmental issues. Chance's career since graduating from St. Xavier has continued to develop in that vein, but brought him to the West Coast, where he found an important mentor in the late Hewitt Johnson, who most of you will know as the former Secretary for California Natural Resources Agency. Chance has been working more recently, for the Marin-based Research Renewal Institute since 2015, first as a research associate, then as Director of Special Projects and Strategic Initiatives, and as project manager for Fish in the Fields project, a project that I think he'll talk a little bit about today. For the last 3 years, he served full-time as the Director of Programs for the Institute. In addition to these roles, Chance also serves as Vice Chair of Sierra Club San Francisco Bay Chapter and on the board of International Rivers. In addition to this work, Chance has recently become more directly engaged in local governance. He was elected last fall at the age of 27 to the Town Council of Fairfax, where he is especially interested in helping craft environmental policy and implementing strategies aimed at addressing racial equity and social justice. So please join me in welcoming Chance to the podium today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've never been to a Rotary Club event before, so that whole first portion of it was like enough entertainment for me. I felt like we could have just kept ringing bells all day and I would have been satisfied with that. But I am super excited to be here. It's an honor, especially when Jason reached out and I didn't connect the dots yet. And then he finally, at the end of this email, I realized that it was my former professor who was reaching out from San Jose Rotary. So really excited. Jason just told me to talk a little bit about my work, the climate work that I've been doing in California, and I thought there's no better opportunity to talk about this sort of next wave of environmentalism that's sweeping across the world and across California, which is all about ecosystem restoration as it relates to climate change. And so we're sort of in this next decade of ecosystem restoration, and just have a couple slides and I'll move through the early ones quick just to keep up with time and get to a Q&A, lively discussion. But wanted to just mention projections, you know them, contributors, we have a sense of them, some of the consequences that we've seen in the news lately, and then move on to sort of this decade. And the case study that I want to address is something that I work on. When I'm not wearing this nice camel hair blazer, I'm like in muck boots and waders in the Sacramento Valley. I'll talk about my work with fish and ducks and rice fields as well. And then we'll move to Q&A. So Real quickly, as you know, billions of people around the world are suffering from the consequences of the climate emergency as it relates to food and water and energy, and even the pandemic is an extension of that. And so we have a couple potential pathways that we're trying to figure out, and there are a couple culprits or confounding factors here. This chart from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change actually highlights generally the greenhouse gas emissions around the world. And I'll just draw your attention, in places like San Jose or San Francisco, we talk a lot about greening transportation, mode shift, getting on bicycles more, getting out of your single occupancy vehicles. We talk about decarbonizing our buildings. But the other work that's happening in the Central Valley, which is where the majority of our state's water goes, is related to that acronym AFOLU, agriculture, forestry, and other land use. And that's the green one. It makes 25% roughly of global emissions. And it's going to increase as we decrease the other ones. So by 2050, we expect that agriculture globally is going to be about 70% of allowable emissions as we try to crack down on all the other categories that you saw in that chart. The challenge that we've had with agriculture is where this intersection of equity and the environment, as far as climate is concerned, and biodiversity sort of take form. So though biodiversity underpins the global food system, the expansion has led to a loss of 85% of our wetlands around the world. In California alone, 95% of our wetlands have been lost due to reclamation projects. And a lot of people don't realize that this was this mecca for migratory birds back before, like pre-contact. Agricultural expansion has also altered about 75% of the lands around the world, both with deforestation and other issues. And then this is despite the fact that 75% of all amphibians, all birds, 80% of all amphibians, and 68% of all mammals rely on these land uses respectively. So the fragmentation, the habitat loss is only exacerbating the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. And also, of course, impacted our oceans, which produce 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we rely on in the atmosphere, that are seeing increasing dead zones as they suck up more and more of the CO2 and become more and more acidic. And of course, we deal with sea level rise all across the Bay Area. Some of the consequences I alluded to: one, in North America alone, agricultural land conversion is responsible for the disappearance of about 3 billion birds since the 1970s, from a couple of factors, but that's sort of been in the news quite a bit. The other that's not in the news as much is the decline in freshwater species as well. So globally, freshwater species have declined about 84% between 1970 and 2016. And so we're seeing the impacts on communities that rely on fish, that rely on healthy soils, that continue to produce and get positive yields. And the United Nations, the state of California, the White House have all tried to move us in the direction of this UN decade on biodiversity restoration and ecosystem restoration. And we hope to achieve these multiple goals at the same time. There's a lot of text on this slide, but the main point is just that there's this real clear intersection between the people that work on these lands, like in the Santa Clara Valley Open Space District, not just the reserves and preserves, but also the working landscapes, as well as the emissions and the carbon cycling that happen within these ecosystems, and the way that those support us all in these built environments, and trying to make sure we find some balance there. There are a variety of restoration approaches that are proposed and that we're currently building out, right? So there's restoration of mangrove forests, there's agroforestry projects that are happening where we're trying to grow coffee in like overgrown canopies. So we're building out like new forests and mid-level canopies. Restoration of aquatic production ecosystems. So like trying to rebuild multi-trophic aquaculture where you have differing types of fish that you're raising along with maybe bivalves that purify water and vegetation that could also be sold. And then regenerative agriculture, regenerative grazing practices, and even rewilding. And the rewilding case is sort of what I wanted to mention. You know, I did this work in Yellowstone, classic case of what's possible in terms of fighting climate change when you do some of these restoration initiatives. So when these are a series of time series bar graphs, or line graphs, but you'll see in the top left, when wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone, not only do you see a decrease in elk, but you also see an increase in cottonwood, willows, and a variety of other characteristics, an increase in bison, actual aspen height. And so we saw that by adding this grazing pressure, increasing the complexity of the ecosystem, by bringing this keystone species back, you actually reduce the grazing pressure on all this vegetation. So there's actually studies that show when you introduced wolves, you actually could map that to bird population densities increasing in South America, because they had more habitat for nesting back in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And this is just like a very simplified example, right? Like with wolves, a little bit fewer of the elk browsing, increase in forage versus the opposite. And my case study that I wanted to share with y'all, which is what's going on just northeast of us here, is in California's former wetlands that I mentioned. So on the left is what they used to look like. And over the last 100, 150 years, we've seen a dramatic reduction in wetland ecosystems. Like I mentioned, we only have about 5% left intact. And that box is sort of where I want to take you real quick, which is contemporary rice country. So we have about 500,000 acres of rice, second largest rice growing state in the United States after Arkansas. A lot of people don't realize that. I'm sure there'll be questions about water use in a moment, but the thing I wanted to bring up is rice has become this sort of hallmark in agriculture, working landscapes, and meeting biodiversity because it's a critical part of the Pacific Flyway, where it supplies acreage for wintering and migratory shorebirds and waterfowl. So you just map that sort of map right there, and the rice fields are right in that big hot spot, that red up there. And what I've been doing is actually adding fish, native fish species, back into rice fields in California as an example of the same sort of thing that wolves were doing in Yellowstone. So by adding fish into these winter flooded rice fields, we're not only maintaining and incentivizing this habitat for migratory birds, but we're also looking into some really interesting new research around greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So it's the biodiversity and the climate work by increasing the trophic complexity, the predators in the ecosystem. And this is the sort of model that we've been working with. So as we increase juvenile fish into these former floodplain ecosystems that used to be these wetlands, they're actually grazing on all this free food. As the water spreads out across these floodplains, they're essentially like solar panels, and they produce all of this rich algae and zooplankton that the fish need to get fat. And as they eat that, what we found in our research is those zooplankton stopped grazing on the bacteria one level lower that were oxidizing the methane emissions. And so by adding fish to the fields, we were actually reducing winter methane emissions from rice fields while increasing native fish populations and also the biodiversity for the migratory waterfowl. And this is the type of work that is going to be happening over the next decade. I'm sure you'll hear more and more about the efforts to conserve 30% of our lands and waters by 2030, the attempts to integrate not only our natural systems, but working landscapes all across California and across the country. Because case studies like this that we're trying to integrate, they're far and few between. There are only 18 states in the United States that actually mention climate adaptation and agriculture in any of their planning around climate change, despite a lot of the blue ones that don't have it being a lot of big food producers or crop producers. And so even among those 18, there's not a lot of funding behind the work. and they're often speaking in vague generalities and platitudes about the need to work to restore biodiversity and things like that. But, oops, wrong way. But this is the task at hand. Last year, we had 12% of our state and waters protected for biodiversity, whether it was a national park or something like that, or a conservation easement on a piece of working land. And our goal by 2030 is to have 729 million acres by that time. And so this is just a glimpse into the work that's being done all around us to continue to feed us, but also to make sure we don't see ecosystems collapse or tipping points be met due to the siloed way that we've been working on biodiversity, on climate mitigation, and on trying to feed increasingly hungry planet and a growing population. So thanks very much for inviting me here. I think that's my time, and I'm happy to chat about any of this now and into the future as well. It might not even be on.
Now? All right, here we go.
Nice. There it is.
Yeah, the idea here is that we're flooding rice fields in Northern California where we have such a drought. What is the thinking about what if we don't get a good rainy season this coming winter? How can we justify growing that rice, which I believe is mostly consumed outside of the United States?
That's a great question. Thank you, Fernando. So about 44% of the rice, because we are one of the highest rice yielding, as far as rice yielded per acre, producers in the world. And it's very high quality rice. So anecdotally, they say that like for every piece of sushi you have, there's some California rice in there in the United States. The 44, 46%, something like that, is exported to places that demand high quality rice, like Japan, et cetera. So this is a critical piece across the board for agriculture, which is with fewer and fewer resources to go around, investors coming in and exporting crops, they're actually exporting water out of the state, out of the country, et cetera. So it's definitely a concern. The reason the rice field work is interesting, and it's definitely decreasing the water use over time, but the reason it's interesting is because it's making up these temporary wetland ecosystems that we've completely rid the state of as we've shifted to alfalfa, as we shifted to almonds, et cetera. And so there are fewer wetland ecosystems left. And so a portion of the rice may not be able to continue, but a portion strategically might be able to be kept as we try to get climate smart about agriculture and finding ways to get like the win for food producers, the win for birds, the win for fish. And it is the only crop that has a second life coming out off the field. It goes back into rivers, and if there aren't fish in those fields, they carry the zooplankton into rivers that feed endangered salmon and things like that as well. So it's a super complex puzzle, but we're trying to tinker with it, and that's the name of the game right now.
Chance, thank you for your work.
I think your mic turned off.
Thank you for the Resource Renewal Institute's work. Long time in California. It's been great work. Fascinating to see the work in Yellowstone in rural areas like you just showed. What's your view on the role of working in natural lands around our cities in California and how they can contribute?
Yeah, great question, and pertinent to the work that you're doing, no doubt. And thank you for your work as well. My boss, who passed away last year, Huey Johnson, he was the 8th employee of the Nature Conservancy, first employee west of the Mississippi, and built out the Trust for Public Land, which is now one of the largest environmental NGOs in the country. And then through Resource Renewal Institute, we spun out the Grand Canyon Trust, and other land trusts. And so land trusts have this great opportunity to do green belting and protect not only our most treasured ecological resources that are in the more rural areas like old growth forests, certain coastal resources, but also they're able to have this mutual benefit of like the working lands as well. And so, when I first moved out here, I worked to extend the urban growth boundary for another 20 years up in northern Marin County. And that's an example of a policy instrument that you can use to preserve those rural landscapes and focus on compact growth and in growth around transportation corridors. But those, like that type of work, whether it's using a land trust to acquire land and hold it, or whether you're doing policy measures to sort of figure out how you want to plan, or both, they're critical because those buffers not only have the mutual benefits for biodiversity, for climate, et cetera, but there's also this equity component that we've seen a lot through the pandemic, where more and more people want to get outdoors, had the opportunity to get outdoors, needed to get outside and away from their Zoom screens. And having those rural belts and those green spaces that are connected to national parks and state parks is just another opportunity to make sure that folks have a place to go to get outside and to experience nature. And it might not be like getting them all the way out to a rural area, but it might also be the establishment of really good pocket parks in a network of trails and bicycle access points to get to pocket parks in cities, as well as the park district land and the land trust land that lies right outside of cities.
Hi, Chance. Thanks very much for your talk and your work. I was interested, shifting a little bit. A lot of the discussion around the environment has often been framed as an either-or kind of conversation. You seem to be very much moving into the both end. And I wonder about, the work you're doing on the fish project, your relationship with the farmers and the agricultural communities there in terms of the work you're doing, how they view you, how that dialogue is.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, because as a environmentalist steeped in sort of David Brower era, older school, we don't make compromises, kind of that sort of Huey Johnson mentality that my mentor had. Every day it's constantly assessing how do what is appropriate and what is a giveaway, or things like that. Some people criticize this 30 by 30 initiative and say why are we only safeguarding 30% of our lands and waters? Why are we sacrificing the rest? Not to say that everybody thinks that at 2030 we're done, but it's just trying to set an ambitious standard for the next decade. Working with rice farmers is amazing in the sense that I think they are seeing that they've been beneficiaries of this long-standing water rights legal system, where it's like a first in time, first in right system, and they get some of the earliest access and the most consistent access to water in the state of California, because they're closest to the Sierra that's giving them this water, and multi-generational, 4 or 5 generations of ranching or rice farming. I think they're seeing that it's either they have to participate in something that's climate smart, and that there have to be these negotiations, or there's no other way to continue to operate the way that they've wanted to operate. And so the one thing I would add to that is, if a good book recommendation would be a book by the author Mark Arax. who lives in Fresno, and it's called The Dreamt Land. And he talks a lot about wonderful company like Palm Wonderful and the creators of Cuties, and their work to expand agricultural footprints in the San Joaquin Valley, and the complications of these like voluntary water markets and people trying to purchase water for 10, 20, 50 times the price that it's actually sold for up north, where like we have a water-rich portion of the state. And so there's I think across the state there are researchers and scientists and journalists that are starting to uncover that we've been extracting a lot from the land, and time's up, you know. And so more and more people are coming to the table, and the state has been really good about trying to do more carrots than sticks, at least in the last couple of years with like voluntary partnerships. And so that's kind of where things stand right now. And yeah, but things can change if we don't act quickly. Yep.
Thank you, Chance. And we will be making a donation on your behalf to an environmental organization that you get to choose. So before you leave today, can you give me some input? Brian? Thank you, Brian. Carl Salas has an idea he wants to share. Carl, come on up.
So I'm just talking to the people watching us on Zoom right now, so you guys can all leave if you want. No, but I want to tell you, this really could be the greatest Rotary Club in the world. It really could be. When I started in 2001, that was the word. It was the greatest Rotary Club in the world. I think it still is. And when I've been on Zoom and out of Connecticut, and I was in LA a couple of weeks ago, I was like, wow, these guys have got it down. But I took some notes today. I want to tell you, you don't have to come to the meeting. And I know Steve was kind of saying, oh, please come. You get to come to these meetings. What I experienced today just here, as being here physically, is really a treat. And if it's the greatest Rotary Club in the world, I think it may also be the greatest people in the world. And the ones I talked to today, Bill Show, I checked in with Bill Show. He's the executive director of History San Jose. He checks you in. He was telling me what's going on at History San Jose. Charlie McCullen. Charlie, I wish I could talk as slowly and succinctly as you do. But I just want to tell you, I ran into him. I'm working with the Red Badgers on a Red Bad project at the Carousel in the Green Green. And Charlie was helping me with some of the audio stuff. I walk in the president's table. I see Brian Adams for the first time in a long time. I see Jerry Silva. I see, oh my God, I got to see Larry Stone, for goodness sakes. Who, by the way, I think is running again, right, Larry? I was looking around for Red Badgers. There aren't very many here. I saw Octavia over there. But there aren't many Red Badgers here. But I do want to encourage, especially you Red Badgers, to come on out here, because there are some great people here, and it's just really fun being here. Mike Anning, he's over there with Mike Bohr. Mike Bohr was at the Tony's last week, 2 weeks ago, I think. And Mike wore a suit from Hammer & Lewis, my favorite store in San Jose, and he got great credit, right? Mike Anning has been here probably more than anybody else here, and he's not a Red Badger. Mike, I asked him about interest rates. He knows all about interest rates, so I always get information from everybody here. But if you don't have a Red Badge next week, I'm going to have you wear my past president's badge. I can't take it any longer. What else? Oh, I sat next to Matthew Rubin. We all got to see his kilt, and I got to sit next to him and see this kilt and his legs the whole time. If you were here, you could see his legs the whole time. And forgive me, I don't mean to embarrass you, Karen, but none of you saw Karen's shoes today except the people here. Karen, your shoes are like off the charts. They're off the charts. I hadn't seen Dave Peterson in a long time. Dave is of us business people here in San Jose. He was probably the most impacted, even more than restaurateurs, by the pandemic. And Dave, I'm dying to talk to you about how you're doing. It's just fascinating. And finally, I got to see Fernando. Fernando, I saw you for a year on Zoom. I'd never really seen you with pants on, so it's really nice to see you. Bottom line, all you people on Zoom, you get to be here. If you get a chance, come on down. If you don't get a chance, stick on the Zoom, because you guys in the back do an incredible job, and this may be the greatest Rotary Club in the world.
Thank you, Carl. I totally agree. Next week, we have the Lee Weimer's program, always one of the best of the year, so please show up and bring a Rotarian with you. And next week, I have to go, or get to go, I should say, to Cincinnati with Leslie to go to the large club conference. I'll report back on it when I get back. And Sal Pizarro, who will be your president soon, probably not soon enough for most of you. He'll be running the meeting next week. And with that, thanks to everyone, especially the bell ringers, and we'll see you soon.